creating a culture of love.
What kind of therapy have you done? Ask them.
I want to do what you're doing, minus the colorful socks.
Toxic positivity, masculinity, authenticity.
Therapy is usually the first thing that goes because
No,
it
exactly.
is. People see it as a luxury, and that is like, do I really need this? And it's also very expensive.
Only thing I could think about was what happened to you?
We've got an angry therapist. We
Yes.
got John Kim. We'll find out why he's so angry. We've got Vanessa Bennett in the house. They actually co-wrote a book. And we're going to sit here and talk about therapy and self-love and the importance of it and costs and why therapy and why is it important? Like all these things that, why are people afraid to get therapy or even have these conversations? And maybe we'll talk about our parents. Maybe we'll talk about anyone. So welcome to the show. Thank you for being in here. And, what led you to becoming a therapist?
Wow. Okay, I'll let you start.
I mean, I think not all, but a lot of us would probably say it was our own experience with our own therapy. A lot of therapists find their gateway through having profound transformational experiences in their own therapeutic work, right? So it was like that for me. I mean, I was in advertising for a long time in New York, doing the grind and, producing commercials and flashy things and working for the top agencies and all the fun stuff. But I was not happy and I didn't know why.
Yeah.
One of my best friends at the time, I remember being 25 and her just saying, "You just seem so angry all the time." And me being like, "What are you talking about?" I mean, just no ability to see that in myself. So I started therapy and found yoga and meditation all within the same month. And it just completely transformed my life. Did my teacher training for yoga. I just I like to talk about it being like breadcrumbs. A lot of people come to me during this, like, I don't know what I want to do with my life. I want to transition my career. And similar to my path, it's like, you don't need to know what that last step is. You just got to follow the breadcrumbs, right? So it's like, what brings you a sense of aliveness? What gets you excited? What makes you feel motivated, right? What do you become obsessed with? And then just lean into that. And so I did that for a few years, teacher training, yoga therapy training, nutrition programs, like all these different things. And then my therapist actually ended up bringing me a pamphlet for the school that I ultimately went to, which was in California, and said, I think this is the school for you. This seems like it would be right up your alley. It's called Pacifica. And so I flew out by myself. I was in a relationship that wasn't doing the best at the time. Flew out to California, had no idea what I was doing, drove down the coast by myself in, some shitty little car that I rented. And I just had a full body, visceral kind of, holy shit, this is what I need to do. And I took the leap. I did the back and forth. I was full-time in advertising for the first almost 2 years that I was in grad school full-time, flying back and forth from New York to LA and New York every month.
That's a commitment.
It was a commitment. And then I hit a wall, packed my suitcases, got on a plane, started my entire life over again in my early 30s. And it's been a journey. And then I met him a few years in.
Hey, fun fact. Reminds me of Kanye West with the whole is it Under the Wire?
Yeah, Through the Wire.
Through the Wire. She broke her jaw coming out of a hot tub, and her mouth was shut with
2 weeks after I moved to LA.
with a wire for a month, and she had to eat every meal through a
month?
straw.
Try almost 9 weeks.
9 weeks. Can you imagine? It completely wired
I
shut.
can't imagine. I like chewing gum. I like chewing things.
Jeez.
Like chewing anything, like talking.
yeah.
It changes everything.
But it reminds me of how you can take a situation and because I don't know how she did that, but actually meditate your way into not panicking and having your mouth shut for 9
by
weeks.
moment.
Isn't that crazy?
Yeah.
Yeah, that was right when I moved here. It was
Does that make
immediately.
you a better listener?
It did. It did.
Because she talks a lot?
Because I'm a talker.
Yeah,
I'm actually a rare therapist. Most therapists tend to be more introverted, and I'm actually very extroverted. And so I was always kind of the outlier even in grad school. For sure, it helped me listen more. It definitely forced me to focus on my meditation practice. It really forced me to just deepen all of the spiritual practices I'd already kind of been dabbling in, but really get secure in them because it was the only way that I could have made it through that experience. I mean, that was definitely one of the most challenging things I've ever gone through. Hands down. It was fucking gnarly, to say the least. Yeah. What about you?
I became a therapist because of Doris. I grew up in LA like you. I always say, she's Biggie, I'm Tupac, very pro LA, and Went to film school, was a screenwriter, got married early, headed toward the picket fence. The screenwriting, it didn't work out. I couldn't make it a career. The marriage fell apart. And I was on Craigslist, and I found a roommate and started with nothing. And with a change I was seeing my own therapist, and he's like, well, if you can't do the writing, what do you want to do? And I said, I want to do what you're doing. I would love to just sit in a room, and I had no idea what it entailed. I wanted to just have these conversations. You've helped me a lot. I want to help other people. I want to do what you're doing, minus the colorful socks and the khakis, and,
The pleated pants.
yeah, and the nondescript room and all.
The athletic hip version.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think doctors, therapists wear their pants a little too high, and they're always ironed. And so next thing you know, I'm 35, back in grad school, fell in love with psychology. And one thing I realized after that was I don't want an office. I want to work with people out of the office. And so I just started blogging and called it the Angry Therapist because I was unhappy, which made me angry. And through Tumblr, I started getting emails, and then we started meeting. I started meeting people in coffee shops, brought people into the blocks, went on hikes. There's a lake in Hollywood, Silver Lake, where the lake is exactly 50 minutes. So I used to take clients around the lake. And I started working kind of in unconventional ways, and people were like, what are you doing? And so I was kind of known for the therapist that went rogue. But these days, that's kind of the standard. Like, who wants, it's more normal now. So I did that in 2010.
And it probably took away the fear around, I'm going to go into this office through the two doors, and they're going to be there, and I'm on, do I lay on the couch? Do I sit on the couch? What do I do? Do I stand? Like, but you're like, dude, we're going for a walk.
Yeah.
It takes the pressure off you to save someone, quote unquote, or help someone, be the expert, right?
Yeah.
So it's like, let's just be friends, without being friends.
Friendly.
Yeah.
Because there's a fine line between being a therapist and being their friend.
Yeah, you're not supposed to do any of that shit. You are supposed to be in an office or via Zoom now, and kind of be very neutral. You're not supposed to go on walks with your clients and do stuff like that.
You're not supposed to show yourself. I mean, I do think that you were definitely in the beginning kind of pioneering of that, which was like even calling yourself the Angry Therapist, like being honest, being open, being vulnerable. This is who I am. This is the reality. I'm a human just like you are. And that was different back then. I mean, I think we're seeing it more now on social media, and it's refreshing. I think a lot of people are realizing that old way of, Freud sitting in the chair, somebody laying on the couch, not facing each other, the blank slate, like it's a very antiquated, very patriarchal way of quote unquote healing, right? Like, you're the expert, I'm the healer, you're the sick person. We're changing all that, which is refreshing, and it doesn't work, honestly.
Yeah, and that paints a picture of I'm broken, so I have to go see someone for help.
Right.
Totally.
Which, my mom would say, I don't need anything, I'm fine.
Yeah.
Therapy's for broken people.
Yep.
What about before you're broken?
Right.
Yeah.
And then I'm using broken loosely. I'm putting it in quotes for those listening because it's a misused term. We are broken. I mean, we're the experiences of our traumas, of our happiness, of our memories, of our emotions, and all of that created who we are. And I think trauma is also something that's, well, if I wasn't molested as a kid, like, because that's a really
Do I
bad
really have trauma?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, we have trauma all the time.
I wasn't picked up on time. That's also trauma. Like, that happened to me. I actually hid in a bush for 4 hours. They couldn't find me.
Right.
Yeah.
Like, what do I do? I'm not picked up. I'm 7.
Yes.
Like, let me go hide.
Is that a true story?
That's a true story.
Oh shit!
Yeah.
I was gonna say in I think 9th grade, my parents, typical Koreans, liquor store, burger shacks. I begged my mom for $100 to buy this Christian Hosoi skateboard. With all the, and $100 back then was like, no one spends that kind of money on a skateboard. She finally did it. And the day that I rode that to school, some big kid grabbed it from me and he took it for about 2 hours, and it was fucking traumatic. It was me hiding in the bushes.
Yeah.
I didn't, how am I going to go home? My mom he finally brought it back and it was all good. But in that 2 hours, because it's laughable, oh, someone stole your skateboard, that's not traumatic. It was very traumatic.
with you.
Yeah. So trauma is subjective.
It is, and that's the thing, and we can go into that in a little bit. But I have a question, and the question's around TikTok, social media, all of that. Everyone and their mom is a coach now. So what's the difference between a coach and a therapist, right?
Yes.
Besides, let's say, schooling and licensing, and maybe that is just the difference. But also, it's like, how is an 18-year-old going to give me relationship advice who hasn't had enough of a relationship of themselves?
Sure.
So it's like, should you be of a certain age, of a certain experience? You guys became therapists later in life, right? So how would you answer that?
You want to go? How would you answer that?
I mean, look, we're taught in therapy school that it doesn't matter what the person is presenting. You can provide empathy and provide containment and provide a safe space, right, for this person. And as I've gotten into my career more, I still believe that. And there's a big caveat on that. And when the caveat for me, the aha really came after becoming a mother, where I realized that I was, as a therapist to women, especially who I was not a mother yet, and they were. And a lot of the things that they were struggling with, I now realize there actually are certain things that if you do not have the lived experience, you do not understand, period. I would say it's parenthood. I would say it's race, right? I would say it's maybe very specific religious experiences. Like, there are just certain things that, yes, I can provide empathy, but I am probably not going to be the person that's going to be the most helpful, healing person for you because I don't have that lived experience. And I've actually apologized since to some of my old clients. Like, I'm sorry I couldn't be better or be kind of, I think the therapist that you probably need me to be, because I didn't know. I didn't understand. And holy shit, I do now, right? And so I do think, to your point about some 18-year-old being a coach, I think there are certain things that you need to have lived experience in. Not everything, but I do think there's a lot of things that you do. Yeah, schooling, training, there's something to be said, I do believe, for the hours that are being held over your head. Like, you've got to practice this many hours. You've got a supervisor checking in on you. Somebody's tracking and following your caseload. I think there's something to be said for that, for not just coming out and being like, well, I'm a coach now, without anybody.
You're also in it.
You're in it.
You're also a client to someone else, mentoring. So
yeah. And my school is actually one of the last schools. I know in California it's the only one left. I don't know nationally that actually requires you to be in your own therapy to get your degree.
Wow.
It used to be that was very common. And then, they're trying to just pump people out as fast as they can. They've stopped using that as a requirement. And I know my school is the only one left in California that does. And I mean, that's a whole other conversation, because I will die on a sword how important I think it is. I used to say to people, would you ever go to a dentist that had bad teeth? No, of course you wouldn't.
Or a fitness coach who's like
a fat trainer.
Right.
I mean, come on.
Would you? I mean,
they might be knowledgeable.
Or a hairstylist that has shitty hair. But you just can't see that as a therapist.
Yeah.
And so, I don't know. That was a roundabout.
But that also gives therapists, because you can't see wellness.
Yes.
They could be the do as I say, not as I do.
Totally.
They could be very, their life can be shit, or they could have horrible patterns, but they're trying to help other people. I think the therapist is more under the umbrella of treating someone, even if that treatment is a marriage or a couple. And coaches is more about goal setting. Coaches are not trained to treat anyone,
Level up. More treating it as a sport.
Yeah, but what's happened was, because when I started, Tony Robbins was basically the only life coach. Yeah. And then now, because of the crust of social media, especially Instagram, and the commercialization of wellness, yoga, Lululemon, lifestyle, there's a lot of people, just because they have a big following or they're attractive, now they call themselves coaches, because then they don't have to go to therapy school or do all these things. And there are some great coaches, I'm sure, but it's not going to be sustainable, because they're going to have imposter syndrome, or they're not realize that, how do I do this? So they're just going to be telling a lot of people what to do, and that's not.
Or regurgitating other people.
Or copy and paste coach.
And that's a big thing with therapists and coaches. I would say that's the difference, is that as therapists, we don't tell people what to do, right?
Well, either as coaches, you shouldn't.
Technically, but I know a lot of coaches who do, right? And here's how you do this. Here's how you get a good relationship. Do step 1, 2, 3. It's very structured.
And you check in. Did you do step 1, 2, 3?
Homework, things like that.
Accountability. Right. But I don't want to poo-poo coaches, because I'm also a coach.
Yeah, same.
There's no board with coaching.
Yeah.
So you can take walks and do stuff out of the box. Because as a therapist, I felt very trapped and constricted. Like, imagine as an artist, here color by numbers, or do this, you can't do that. It's like, So with coaching, there's more poetry.
Yeah,
can be.
No, and it's not about poo-pooing one versus the other. It's
the difference.
I think that it's so jumbled now.
Yeah, there's a lot of
It's like,
overlap.
what is the
Yeah.
difference? Like,
Yeah.
what do I really need? Do I need a coach or do
Yeah.
I need a therapist?
A lot of people have both.
Let's talk about that one.
Let's talk about money. Let's talk about money. Okay, we are in a looming recession. I mean,
Yeah.
it's hurting.
Yeah.
I'm an
Yeah.
entrepreneur. I
Yeah,
have a lot of
everyone's hurting.
facets to my business. They are all being squeezed. They're all being hurt, right? My wife's self-employed also. She's a real estate agent, and we were doing therapy. And the one question you ask yourself is like, well, it is what it is because we need to do this so that we can be better in the future and not, quote unquote, be broken or have problems or be in the. I think once you're really in the problem, that's worse. Preemptive therapy or preemptive practice, like let's practice, let's
Yeah.
get better, let's go in and out of this thing. But how do you afford it, right? It's
Yeah, it's so expensive.
we were doing therapy. It was $375 an hour.
Wow.
And
That's high, by the way. We're in LA, and I'm here to say that that's still high.
That is
and
high.
it-
I mean, I charge around that, but I won't pay that. Which,
well,
what I'm
and
saying? Like,
what's tough? What's tough is it was during pandemic also, so
Yeah.
that was a little
Yeah.
tight. But then it became over Zoom. It's like in my head as a business owner, I'm like, holy shit, you have no office
Overhead.
space. No, you're at home, just crushing it.
yeah.
And then when it's done, and you're like, we didn't even get into it yet.
Yeah.
And I just feel like, okay, well, we need this. It's helping us. But the money was such a hard
Yeah.
point in
Yeah.
anything you do in life. All the pain points always lead to money. It's always about the money. Is there enough value? Can I afford it? Is there a cheaper option? Is there a more expensive option? Like, what are these things? So what is the sweet spot? Like, we all know we need therapy. I'm not even going to say
Yeah.
it's not an
Yeah.
issue. People need it. It's not about being broken. It's not about being abused. It's not about any of that. But how do you navigate, like, what is a fair rate? How much should I invest in that? Because then we've got our $300 gym membership and our meditation app and our making sure we eat organic. Like, it
Our
just
$8
starts getting
lattes.
crazy. Yes, I could cut the latte. That's easy. But still,
Yeah.
like, a lot of people can't. And they're
Yeah.
like, dude, I need my $8 latte.
I can't cut the $8.
I like
He
my
can't cut
$20 margaritas. Like,
My pour coffee is $10, which is nuts. But
let me
I still
introduce you
pay
to
it.
strong coffee.
still pay
I'll
it.
give you some after
Yeah.
this.
But you know what? Therapy is usually the first thing that goes because
No,
it
exactly.
is.
Always.
People see it as a luxury, and that is like, do I really need this? And it's also very expensive. There is insurance, but not every therapist takes insurance.
I would say probably 9.9 out of 10 say
Agreed.
no.
Well, so here's
Yeah.
what I'll say. I mean, it's not possible to have this conversation without at least touching on the fact that the system in itself is broken.
Oh, yeah.
Right?
Yeah, for
The
sure.
mental health system in this country is a absolute dumpster fire,
Mm-hmm.
and that goes for the people who are actually seeking mental health, and that goes for those of us who are attempting to work within the system as
Mm-hmm.
mental health providers, right? The reason why therapists don't take insurance is because they make zero money when they take insurance, right? So, for example, I have a girlfriend who works out of Chicago. She does take insurance. You think for every 50-minute session, she's probably that same week spending 30 to 40 minutes doing paperwork for that same client. Okay.
get paid, or else
So
you
now
don't
you're
get
at an
paid.
hour and a half. Now let's say somebody's copay is $20, right? She's billing. She might be making $40 on that client. I'm not kidding. She has insurance companies that will give her $30 a client. That's not even sustainable. Whether you're in Chicago or the middle of nowhere, I don't care. It's not sustainable. So top to bottom, we're all in this together, meaning like our system is screwed up,
Yeah.
right? So that's not necessarily me justifying a therapist charging $375, but it is to say like there's no bad guy, good guy in this. Like we're all trying to figure this shit out. I'll be the first one to say we've got to figure something out, right?
This is why there's a lot of startups and even companies like BetterHelp who are
Yes.
trying to provide affordable therapy.
Whether
I don't
they're
know.
doing it right
I
or
don't know
wrong,
if it's
right?
working or not, but it's a luxury. It's for
And
people.
it shouldn't be.
Yeah.
It's a privilege, and it shouldn't
Yeah,
be,
it shouldn't
right?
be.
And it does. You're right. The $375 an hour therapist versus let's go to a community mental health clinic,
Yeah.
where mostly it's interns, right? Because that's all they can afford is the unpaid intern. You are going to get a different level of care,
Yeah.
and usually the people who need the highest level of care are getting the therapist with the least amount of experience.
Yeah, people without money.
It's not how it should
The
be.
broke. Yeah.
You know?
Yeah. I mean, it's we don't have answers.
have answers.
The system's broken.
Yeah.
That's what it is.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But I will say there are ways, and John, I'm going to give you a shout out for this one. During the pandemic, John, I guess, and I kind of started this business where it was all online group therapy sessions, right? It was called the Tat Lab. We did it for about 2.5 years.
I modeled it after gym membership.
Yeah,
So
and it was
like,
basically the class pass of wellness, right?
40,
is
50
what we
bucks a
called
month.
it.
rotating therapists,
Therapists,
and
coaches.
but it's not individual; it's group work. So if you're
Right.
down with 6, 7 other men, women, and it was then very affordable.
But it was so
it was powerful.
powerful.
And I also
Yeah.
think a lot of people will thrive more in that setting because,
Yeah.
oh, this person's sharing and I
Right.
have that
Yes.
too.
Right.
Or you can get away with not sharing and hearing,
Yes.
and
Yeah.
that might give you courage to
Yeah.
share and apply.
Or to
Yeah.
make changes
or
in
just
your
feel
life.
less alone, or just show up
Yeah.
to something and
Community.
listen,
Yeah.
like a live podcast, and you just feel less alone.
Yeah.
Totally.
Yeah.
And it was really life changing. I mean,
Yeah.
there's been a lot of people still to this day that come out of the woodworks and they're like, you have no idea what that's done for
Mm-hmm.
me. It's really changed the way I look at group therapy as a therapist myself. I'm way more interested now in doing groups, and it's more affordable, it's more accessible. So
Well,
there's
because of
different ways.
Zoom, it's
Yeah.
now kind of the standard. So I think that I don't know if it's a solution, but that's one way to get
a bridge,
mental
maybe.
health. It's not individual sessions, but
Yeah.
it's one way to get, I think, affordable therapy is. Well, that's what CrossFit is.
Yes.
Didn't CrossFit get started because was it a great Glassman as a coach? He
One-on-one
wasn't making
coach,
any money. He's like,
exactly.
fuck this, I'm going to
Combine
do
it.
group work and charge
Yeah.
a membership. And then, but with that came community and this
Mm-hmm.
closeness.
Totally.
So I think that's one angle, and I think that's going to kind of grow. But as
all
far
thirsty
as
for it
yeah,
anyway,
but as far as
this
the system,
community.
yeah, you can only do so much.
Yeah.
And when there'll just be a couple of these, and then we're gonna go a little deeper. What should you look for in a therapist?
That's a great question.
Yeah.
Yeah. No one has ever asked me, where did you graduate? What were your grades? And I'll just, in this podcast, I'm not even a therapist. I don't have a, no, I'm kidding.
He's
I shouldn't,
lying.
that shit. Can you
Not
guys, can you edit
funny.
that out?
That's
Because
not
someone's going to
funny.
be like, oh, I knew he was a
I
fucking
knew it.
fraud. Okay. The relationship you have with yourself, the therapist in itself can be therapeutic.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? People are like, I want to know how smart the person is. So, and that isn't really something you can put on paper, right? It's chemistry, it's dynamic,
You get the vibe, you
like
get
to
the
say it's like
energy.
dating.
energy,
Honestly.
culture, right? All of that. So, I think the chemistry of the relationship can be transformative,
Yeah.
more than transformational, more than what the therapy knows. So for me, it's less about knowledge and more about
Potency, maybe?
the potency of our dynamic.
Yeah. I mean,
Trust,
that's,
rapport,
Trust, rapport,
that's- I mean, that's-
humor.
there's
energy
been research done
exchange.
on that, right?
Yeah.
Like that the actual relationship itself can actually and usually is the most healing component.
Yeah, so
to
that's what
therapy.
you should look. That should be at the top.
But also, I would ask the person what their own experience is with their own therapy.
Great
if the person
question.
is seeing a
Like I said, I
therapist,
will
yeah.
fall on my sword every
What are
time.
your
What's
experiences
your
with your own
relationship with your own
Yeah.
therapy, your own healing? What kind of therapy have you done?
Mm.
Ask them. Name the modalities. What kind of therapy have you done? How long have you been in therapy? Are you currently in therapy? Again, this is not blank slate days. This is not Freud days. This person should be open to telling you. And
Yeah.
I am sorry if this ruffles feathers, but if they tell you they don't, or if they tell you they kind of skirt around the issue, next.
Yeah.
Hard pass.
So, like, even with us, we're very different. She's from depth psychology,
Mm-hmm.
and she looks at the collective. She's Jungian. I'm more street, so I'm the hybrid of a coach and therapist, right?
Mm-hmm.
I'm technically a therapist, but I'm also gonna kind of give you homework and tell you what
More
I'm gonna give
behavioral.
some advice. I'm more direct.
Yeah.
And so I'm not for everyone, and she's not for everyone.
Yeah.
So yeah,
You gotta date your therapists and see who you vibe
not
with.
literally. Don't date your therapist.
And my follow well, like you
Metaphorically.
guys. My follow up to that is going to be, when do you know when to break up with your therapist? Like you've been with them for years,
Yeah.
6 months.
Yeah.
Like I know someone that's probably been with their therapist for 6, 7, 8, 9
I know,
years.
20, 30 years.
At that point, is it helping, or should you get a new lens? Or
Yeah.
do you know each other so well and it's just a habit? Now it's just like breathing oxygen.
Right.
Well, I mean, to go back to the relationship itself being the healing container, a lot of times I will push clients, especially clients who have come to me after seeing another therapist, or maybe they're kind of like, they're not sure if they should, and they're asking me as a consult. I will ask them if this was a romantic relationship, or if this was a relationship with a sibling or a friend, right? Especially, oh, this person said something I didn't like. I get this a lot. Well, this therapist, they pissed me off, right? And now I don't feel like I can trust them anymore. Okay, well, what would you do if this was a real interpersonal relationship? Would you never talk to them again? Or would you have a conversation and tell them they hurt your feelings? Well, a lot of people would actually just bounce out and cut them off.
Yeah.
We all know that's not necessarily the healthy way of approaching relationships. Awesome. Well, what better place to practice the skills of saying to somebody, you hurt my feelings, how do we repair this? than within the safe relationship of a therapist. A therapeutic relationship can actually provide you so many examples and opportunities to practice relational skills in the moment that you don't feel like you have anywhere else in your life.
No one does that though.
Well,
Like, they should,
no one,
but
no
you know,
one.
you should say, "Hey, you said something the other day that kind of hurt my feelings. Can we talk about that?"
I've had people come back and report to
With
me
your
after
therapist.
I've talked to them about this, and I
Yeah.
have said, like, you're being presented an
Yeah.
opportunity to do the work. Put the pedal to the
Yeah.
metal. Like, do the actual work.
No,
that you keep
and
talking
that's
about.
fair. And then John, what you just said is, I'm in that case sometimes because I'm not going to hold a grudge. I let it slide. I forget it. I
Yeah.
move on.
Yeah.
But then when it happens again, oh, I should have said it
Should've said
because it's
something.
happening again.
Yeah.
So how do we deal with being the person that, okay, I'm quick to move on or quick to forgive or quick to move on? I said that twice, quick to move on, because that's really what it comes down to.
I think that if you know it's part of your growth and you're going to get, it's growth soil for you to use your therapist or that relationship to grow, because it's not your job to take care of the therapist, right? You can say things to your therapist that may upset your therapist, and that's on them. Take advantage of that opportunity. Most people see therapists as kind of like, a teacher or a mentor. They're just scared to like rock the boat. But you're paying for these sessions.
Yeah.
You know?
Get the most out of it.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I would say speak up in the room.
Yep.
Use that as the mental gym.
Yeah,
not
I'm
just
looking at
everything.
it at my safe space crying zone. Like,
Well,
let
that
me
too.
come
It
in
could be that
here.
too. Yeah.
And
But-
wanting to go into that space. Not
Yeah.
saying
Yeah.
that actually happens, but like wanting to go there.
Yeah.
Right, but if
Maybe-
you're in therapy to learn skills, right? Most people come to therapy to learn and to better their relational skills, right? Because none of us were born with this shit. We didn't come out the womb understanding boundaries. Most of us didn't have parents that taught us healthy boundaries, all the things, right? Boundaries just being one. If you are in that room and you are paying this person to learn relational skills, you got to practice it somewhere.
Yeah.
And so there you go. You've got an opportunity, right? So
And-
yes, they can be your safe crying space, but also they can be the space where you can set a boundary, tell
Yeah.
somebody they hurt your feelings, right? I didn't like the way that you said that, whatever that thing is.
It's also a great test, because if your therapist is defensive,
Yes.
then
Oof.
now they're
telling.
being hypocrites.
Yeah.
They have to be open and be willing to have conversations that are hard for them.
Yeah.
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 God, thank God it hasn't happened to me.
Nobody's ever said that. Yeah.
Like, I keep mirrors in my office for a reason. The motto of the show, the title of the show is Live Through Love.
Yeah.
And what I say that is we're choosing love every single day. It's not easy,
No.
right? And knowing and understanding that most people aren't out to get us, but we operate as if they are, right? And like, ooh, we take it personal, we take it this, and we take it that. But living through love and choosing love is active. It's active practice. It's mental practice. But I always say, like, to really get to the root of it is self-love. So how are you dealing with either the experience of someone coming in and realizing, oh, they don't love themselves, and giving them tools or practices to start embracing that? Because I believe, and I'll give an example around forgiveness, if we're asking someone to forgive us for something, but we haven't forgiven ourselves for that same thing, how can we even accept their forgiveness? Like, if we're asking someone to love us, but we don't love ourselves, again, then we can't receive that. So are you finding that more people are actually battling with self-love issues? Because I know that comes up in a lot of conversations with me. I know that was some of my stuff. And, how would you define that, the lack of self-love?
Do you want me to go on that?
Yeah, sure.
I mean, so I don't think it's as cut and dry as, like, you hear people out there kind of in the social media wellness landscape say, like, you can't love somebody else until you love yourself. I don't think it's that cut and dry, only because loving is a process.
Yep.
Love is active.
Yep.
Right? And so it's through the process of loving other people that you also learn to love yourself. So I do believe it's kind of a feedback loop, right? So it's not like stay single and be alone until you learn to love yourself before, like, it doesn't work that way, right? You have to actually put the practices into practice. So there's that component. And also, I don't know if I believe that not that you're saying this, but it's like, I think, again, this kind of social media wellness, it's like, learn to love yourself. It's this very kind of like, you wave a wand and you just suddenly one day love yourself. It doesn't work that way again.
No, and I agree.
Right?
I don't believe in
That's why I'm
any
saying
of
you're
that.
not saying that.
Exactly.
It's like, it's a one step forward, two step back kind
It's
of
like going to the
dance.
gym. You're
Totally.
working out your biceps, your chest. You're working out that self-love muscle, the mental
And
muscle.
just like at the gym, you're not going to go to the gym one time and expect to leave with ripped abs, right?
Exactly.
That's not how it works. It's a slow process. So the way that I talk about self-love is really all encompassing around understanding of self, right? So it's self-knowledge. So love comes from deep understanding, and with deep understanding, a lot of times comes deep reverence.
Yeah.
And so it's through those tiny actions, which I call like the bricks of the house. So to use boundaries again, if I'm shitty at boundaries and I'm learning boundaries and I'm understanding boundaries, every time it seems like a small micro moment that I do the thing that's hard for me and I set a boundary, I'm actually taking a brick and I'm laying it into the foundation of self-understanding, self-knowledge, self-love, right? And it's through those tiny micro moments that I'm actually creating that sense of I can trust myself, I know myself, I love me for who I am, right? Because I show up for myself.
Yep.
I've got my own back. And so it's not this kind of like, you know, woo-woo, love yourself kind of vibe, which I feel like it gets made out to be a lot of times. It's through active work, right? It's through the day-to-day process of it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think the woo-woo stuff is a nice starting point to
Yeah.
take a step toward.
Yeah.
But that's just a step.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Also, it
It's-
can intimidate people, though. I think the woo-woo stuff sometimes is like, whoa, what does that mean? Self-love. And
Oh
I'm like,
yeah, you
fuck
see
it.
the Instagram post every day. I go and see the sunset by myself, and I breathe, and I just tell myself I love myself.
Yeah.
I'm like, you can say that just right now, sitting. Hey, Ruben, just I love you for showing up and being here on this show today to give space to the audience and to us to have this conversation.
Right.
That right there is also an act of
Right.
it.
Sure.
Right.
I think we're also just, again, we make meanings out of everything, so we're just trying to define it. Oh, this is how you do it.
I don't like the word self-love. It's become a bumper sticker. For me, when I was going through my rebirth, it was about self-like, because I think love is a choice. We love people we don't really like, family members.
Yeah.
Has to be earned. And so I said, do I like myself? Oh, there's parts I like, there's parts I don't. Okay, well, I need to start learning and earning my liking myself. Like I would if I met someone and if we became friends, that means I actually like this person because I'm not forcing myself to be friends with this person. So that comes through a process of engagement, trust, testing.
Yeah.
And a lot of this was actually fitness, My drive home was the motivation to go back next day because I wanted to drive home knowing that I liked what I did in that room.
I like how you're framing that, because when you like someone, then you eventually love that person.
Sure.
And the family example, the friends we choose and the circles we build, these are our choices. What
Right.
we're born into
Yeah, that's not a
is a
choice.
whole nother,
Right.
I was born there. That's my family. Okay,
Yeah.
I love them, but that's a whole nother rabbit hole.
If they weren't your
of-
family, would you be engaging with them? Probably.
Exactly.
Some of
and
them
it's
not
the
so much. right?
forced
Yes.
perspective
Yes.
of, oh, blood is thicker. And
don't
that's
believe that.
obviously not the entire quote. Blood is thicker, but like if it's not healthy for you.
Right.
I think relationships are relationships, right? If a relationship is truly quote unquote toxic, which I also don't love that word, but if a relationship is toxic, it's toxic and it should be treated as such, right? A lot of people will tolerate behavior or treatment from family members that they would never tolerate from other people because it's blood. And I just don't, I 1000% do not believe in that.
I agree.
So what does self-like look like instead of self-love?
Yeah.
And what does it look like to earn
Earn your like, right?
earn your like?
Yeah.
Not social media likes. That's all. That's just pressing a button.
Yeah, yeah.
But that requires a journey. That is not a choice. So I like that.
I like that.
But you could use social media. How often are you pushing the button on yourself?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Double tapping.
To,
Double tapping.
yeah, to make a
double
physical
tapping.
thing like, are you doing this right now?
Yeah.
Are you, hey, I like you.
I take my like back.
Exactly.
I've unliked it.
And guess what?
I
You don't-
unfollowed myself many years ago. I got to first start
Yeah,
following
I was
myself.
I just couldn't follow that angry guy anymore.
Yeah.
It just wasn't a thing. Like
I had
I
to
want
do
to
it.
be happy. I only follow positive, happy people.
Oh.
Yeah, right.
No, and there's so many buzzwords in this space: toxic positivity,
Yeah.
masculinity,
Yeah.
authenticity, transparency. I think we
Yeah.
use all these words again to sound smarter
Yeah.
or sound more intelligent, or like we're more in tune.
We overuse them.
But why
That's
can't
the
we just
problem.
are you happy today? Cool. Straight up.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's it.
Yeah.
Or are you angry? Why do we have to be like, are you feeling angsty?
Yeah.
Are you blissful right now? Like we start putting all these other words into it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But leading into that, liking yourself, self-love, we have conversations in our head. We have an entire other soundtrack. Like we're having this conversation. I'm still having a soundtrack.
Sure.
You're having soundtracks.
Yeah.
How do we start acknowledging the multiple soundtracks going on, because some of them are very negative. Some of them are saying, hey, this isn't what you're really feeling, but this is how you're showing up or speaking to. Or are you super kind and loving to everyone else, but inside you're just beating yourself up and doing all that negative self-talk? How are you combating, where self-love and self-like and negative self-talk actually starts playing a role into this?
Yeah, I think first we have to acknowledge that this track, the negative self-talk, whatever your pattern is, that stems deep, man. That goes from childhood. That goes from your story. So it's so ingrained. Just to know that because it's baked in, you can't over the weekend or because you walked on fire or do whatever is suddenly going to stop. That I think is a lifelong practice, right? And this is more herd territory with depth psychology, mindfulness, Buddhism, how to pull yourself out of the cognitive distortions and the rumination and the spinning in your head.
Yeah, I mean, there's a real practice of, again, this is part of that self-understanding, right? There's a real practice around being able to name what those and who those voices are, right? One of my favorite spiritual teachers, Jack Kornfield, always talks about it as your cast of characters. Who is your cast of characters? And really early on in my journey, I made it a point through my own therapy to name what those characters were and who they probably were, who the voices might have even been. Because some of them I could actually pinpoint. I know whose voice that is, But then also what's really helpful, and this is an actual tool, what's really helpful is to animate them. So for example, the kind of judgy, critical voice for me, right? I know whose voice that is. I know what it sounds like. And I was able to animate it in a way where when I think of it, I actually can picture this kind of like black gelatinous little glob that like sits on my shoulder and is like, oh, you can't do that. People don't like you. Be quiet. You're taking up too much space. You're talking too much. Like whatever that talk track is for you, right? That was really helpful for me because it helps you take it out of self. It's part of you, but it's not you, right? And in that moment, I can say, I see you. I hear you. I know what you're trying to do. You're trying to protect me, and I appreciate that, but I've got this, right? Like you can sit down. I'm going to sit at the head of the table now. You don't need to sit at the head of the table anymore. And so it can actually be a really helpful practice to really start to pinpoint all of those multiple voices and then give them characteristics that will help them separate from you, if that makes sense.
No, that makes total sense. Because I could sit here and be like, oh, so I'm the eldest. I have a younger brother. So we have to be the perfect example. I cannot mess up. Like you can't do that. Your brother looks up to you. Like you can't make the mistakes. You can't there's a whole thing around that, and that leads to, there's the fear of success, the fear of judgment, the fear of failure. To me, it's all about the fear of judgment. What am I looking like? How am I being interpreted? Am I being liked or whatever the case is? So I can see that happening. And going through the practice of that, though, I know it's not ignoring it. A lot of us just like, let me ignore it.
No.
But then they're going to become louder and louder and louder.
Yeah.
So I'm not a big journaler. That's not my thing. But would you say the practice, because this makes me think that's a reason for me to journal. Let me put these voices down, these characters down, create the story, the narrative, and then be the protagonist, be the hero, and be like, yo, this is my cast of characters. I never thought about it that way.
I wonder if animating them makes them not monsters, but almost you seeing them as almost like cartoony. Then it creates you're not afraid of them.
It totally can. Yeah, it can help take some of the fear out. Again, it depersonalizes it, right? I think journaling, to your point, Ruben, is helpful. Not for everybody, but for some. I mean, we do talk as therapists. We love journaling. We talk about it a lot. Really, the concept of journaling, though, I mean, there is scientific reason for it, right? So the way that we as human beings experience emotions is we experience them somatically in our body, right? And then we talk them out. And so the process actually in the brain of speaking about your experience is actually the same process as writing about your experience. It's a way that we transmute emotion and experience. So if we don't go through the process of either speaking about them or writing about them, they stay stuck in that kind of first layer of processing, which is just stuck in the body. So there is an importance to, if you're not talking about them, to be writing about them, because otherwise, where are they? Where are they going, right? So it can be helpful. I love the idea of being like screenwriting as kind of a way. It's like, take your cast of characters, you know, write a screenplay about it, you know, and you're the protagonist. Like, what would that look like? There's a lot of exercises actually that I've seen and that I've been part of that do similar things that can have profound effects.
You know what's really helped me is in therapy school, we learn about through family system, raising your differentiation of self, which sounds very complicated. But from that, there's a concept of a pseudo self versus solid self. And I get tattoos as kind of bookmarks of my story, you know, dog-eared pages. And so when I was 2010, when I found CrossFit and I was going through my rebirth, I got pseudo on one arm and solid on the other. And most of my life, I've been living pseudo. Pseudo is the false version of you. It's the thundering voice that we usually listen to. Your solid self is usually the quiet whisper because we ignore this voice. This is your authentic self. So in my 20s and 30s, I was in LA trying to be a screenwriter, chasing shiny things, hit pause on life. If I only sold the $1 million screenplay, then I could have the Range Rover Porsche combo and the beautiful model and the glass
Be
house.
successful, be manly, all, yeah.
And after my divorce, I had nothing. So I said, okay, what if I started listening to my solid self, the one that's the quiet whisper? And I was like, what would that look like? And I was like, oh, well, I would actually say this to this person. I would do this. I would send my mom the voicemail. And then I said, oh, let me see if I can actually execute that. And this is the process of liking yourself, that it's earned. I started doing that. And then that quiet whisper, you start to listen to more and more. And then you kind of walk into this version of you where now you're living inside out instead of outside in. And the thing that I always say, I've said it on every podcast, I'm going to have you paint this across somewhere. Never exchange your truth for membership.
Never say it again.
Never exchange your truth for membership.
Yeah.
So whether that
I love
membership,
that. Never
Exchange
exchange your truth for membership. You don't need to belong to the club. Just be who you are.
Yes.
You are the club.
Yes, and in early days, my membership was Hollywood, trying to get in. But membership can be the picket fence.
can be your
Membership
family.
can be social media
The
numbers.
friend you want to be with. Yeah,
Yeah.
social, everything.
Yeah.
You know, fitting into
So
your family,
once
whatever
you
it is.
start exchanging your truth for membership, now you've become pseudo instead of solid. And so that's kind of my mantra. And over time, I now just am myself. And of course, you know, I struggle with approval, validation, and all that, but not to the extent where I'm now not standing on my truth. And it creates a path, man.
Yeah.
And you also lose friends. You know, some people don't like that shit. And, but you're actually okay with you. And I think
the most
that
important thing.
that eliminates the voices in my head is, am I in my solid self or am I being pseudo?
Would you reference pseudo and solid with almost like ego and intuition?
Sure. I mean,
Similar,
pseudo
yeah.
can be very ego driven. Absolutely. There's a lot of crust there. Intuition, soul, heart centered, love, gut, truth, all of those.
That's the voice we always smash.
Yeah.
This
Yeah.
doesn't feel right.
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah. Yeah.
but I want to be in the club.
What does it look like?
So
Yeah.
this whole thing with toxic masculinity, posturing, all of that is pseudo based.
Yeah.
That's coming from wound. It's not coming
From
from
fear,
solid.
as you would
It's
say,
coming from fear instead of so fear and love.
Fear
so
versus
pseudo
love.
would be fear,
Yeah.
and love would be solid.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But that really helps. That's really helped for me. Get the voices out,
Yeah.
and of course drugs.
Always. A little
Always.
mushroom, a little Molly, let's set us free.
Yeah.
No, and it's a beautiful thing. Like having these conversations, I just think it's been very broad and very open, and I'm hoping that the audience can take away with like, why are we having this conversation? Why should I seek a therapist? Because I think more people than not want to do it.
Yeah.
And again, it does come to the money, but it's like, what can we start talking about on the value? It's like people tell me to journal. A lot of people are telling us what to do.
But
Yes.
not why.
Do this, do this, do this, do this, but why? And that's where I
Yes.
want to go to next. It's like, really like, what's the why here? And what's the ultimate way of how we can maybe start being self-therapists, right? Because once you start accepting yourself, I think, you know what? Let me get an appointment with them.
Yeah.
Because I've been on that path now, and I know I need more because it can't be my lens all the time because we're biased, right?
Yeah.
If we go to physicality, if I'm going to program power cleans all day because that's my favorite thing.
Yeah.
I'm not going to do handstand push-ups because
Right.
that's the bane of my existence.
That's my favorite thing, by the way.
Oh, there you go. I'll tag you in for that. I'll do the power clean.
Right. And we'll never grow. I'll just always be good at that
Just
and
doing
shitty at
what
the
it
other.
is. Yeah.
Which I could segue at Drake Stadium sectionals. There was a power clean handstand push-up workout, and I crapped out at the end, which kept me from qualifying.
Just the word sectionals brings me back because that was before.
Way back.
That was way back.
09,
yeah.
I think.
That's when we were wearing neon shirts and shit. Yeah, I remember that.
I was not part of that.
I would say that
What's the why?
Well, here's the why. 4 stages: to me, by me, for me, and through me. And the why is you want to live in a through me state. In order to do that, you have to work on yourself to get out of the way of yourself, so you can be a conduit for something greater. I mean, you're a great example of this. So your art channeling through you and into the world, whether it's a book cover or murals or on restaurants, that is you getting out of your own way for something greater and that requires self-betterment. That requires you looking inward. That requires checking your ego. It requires a lot of things, right?
Listening to the solid.
Listening to the solid, all these things. If you stop doing that, I think you'll go from a prism to a stone. You will, and so that's why. So the why, I think, has nothing to do with you. I think it has to do with us, as in the world, and what is going to be your contribution, because it's not just going to be your opinion.
Yeah, and it's, I mean, that's a really good way to put it, John. It's like, it's not actually about you. I mean, that's kind of true, right? I mean, we're all in this together. We're inextricably linked, right?
Yes.
Each of us is one cup of an ocean. There's no way to separate it. And when you are looking at what's going on in the world, and you can turn around and look at what's going on for you internally, right? That is a great mirror of what's happening out there. And so it really is around like tending to your side of the street, right? Like, what can I own? What's my 100%? Not selfishly, but because then I can have an impact on something greater than myself, right? There's a lot of finger pointing that goes on. And I mean, what's that kind of cheesing saying where it's like, what, for every finger pointing towards somebody else, there's 3 fingers pointing back at yourself, right? And so we really need to do the work of the finger pointing back itself, because a lot of us point fingers as a way to not have to look at ourselves, right? And there's just no way collectively that we're ever going to move forward on this kind of path of evolution if we're not willing to look in the mirror.
No, and that's beautifully said, because this could apply to a couple different things. One being, we're in a world, we turn on the TV. Like here it is. We're getting bombarded by fear. Pandemics and politics and shootings and all these things. And it's good to stay current in some of this. But we're being force-fed this narrative that makes us insecure, and now we live in this victim mentality. And then there's also this other entitlement mentality, which leads to, how do we look at the world as a collective? We forget that we're part of the whole. It's like, this is my world, that's not happening to me. No, but it is. And, or we take voting as an example. You know, when Trump got voted in, this isn't about politics, it's just an example. Most people went out marching, not my president, like livid. Like in California, it was a huge. I only asked people one question. Did you vote? I shit you not. 9 out of 10 people said no.
Sure.
Especially in California, because we think that it doesn't matter.
And thinks it doesn't matter.
Or that it's not coming home.
Or it was Hillary was automatically going to win, or whatever. We were entitled to like, oh, it's not going to happen to us.
Yeah.
How much of that is happening in our lives that we're not taking action, but then we're out there protesting the opposite? And that's some of the things that I'm like, when do we start taking responsibility? And how does that really start moving forward? And it's not taking it personal, because we take it personal. It doesn't mean we're taking responsibility. When do we actually say, okay, like, where am I in the gap here?
Yeah.
And how can I move through that?
There's a lot of conversations. Funny that you said that. I was just this morning reading some stuff around, there's a couple grassroots organizations that have been really talking specifically to white women around our role in ending gun violence, right? What do I mean by that? So they were talking about the Montgomery, like the integration of the buses, right, in Montgomery, Alabama. And they were talking about how there were protests for years, right? And it wasn't until the white women opened their mouths and got involved. And why did the white women get involved? Because their black house servants stopped coming to work. It upset the white women who no longer had their help. So because they were pissed, they stood up and voiced it. And once they stood up and voiced it, shit started changing.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of conversation going on around now. Like, you can post a black screen on Instagram all you fucking want, right? But until you, the person that holds the privilege, stands up and actually does something,
Yeah.
it's not going to change, right? And that's about looking at self.
Mm-hmm,
That's about saying, like, I actually own part of this problem. I can't say it's everybody else's problem.
Yeah.
It's my problem. It's all of our problems, right? But what can I do to actually get out there and change things? I can't be out there picketing and marching if I wasn't actually doing the voting and doing the calling and all of the things, right? I mean, I can, but it's different. It's got a different flavor to it.
Yeah. It comes from a complete different space.
Totally. Yeah.
Ownership is, I think, where you go for. It's the bridge from to me, meaning a victim mode, the most powerless state, to now for me. Oh, I've owned this. It's my earning, my decision, and now I deserve this. And then the stage after that is through me. So in order to even get there, ownership is required. It's foundational.
Yep.
Yeah.
In your relationship, in your marriage, globally. I mean, ownership just in general.
What's your role, right?
What's your role? Yeah, daily as a father, as a brother. You know, all of it.
All of it. We're a
as a
part of the
citizen.
collective. So, and then that goes, like, I know there's a collective renaissance in consciousness and how people are starting to show up. We see it. Obviously, we experience it way more over here in LA and California than other parts of the world. But at the same time, I think there is such a victim culture growing.
Yeah.
And there's this culture of handouts that has been growing. The people are just like, well, you should just do it for me.
You think it's generational? You think it's because the kids growing up are used to instant gratification? I mean, shit, when I was growing up, if you were to go on a date, you had to have the balls to ask her out. You got to go get your car. You got to put the six disc CD changer in the. You got to do all. Now it's like you swipe, and if you're not feeling it on the date, you're swiping for someone else while she's in the restroom. And I just feel like everything is on demand, and so it doesn't give you. You don't exercise the muscle of actually earning stuff.
I think that feeds into the lack of patience now, and it feeds more into entitlement. I don't study generationally. I've done some studies in the past, and we could tell, like, Great Depression era versus the Boomer era versus X and millennials and so on. Everyone likes to blame an era.
Yeah.
Again, it doesn't go back to taking responsibility, and we do see collective commonalities, I don't want to say problems or issues, within generations, but it's up to us to start changing these things.
Yeah.
Sure.
Well, and it's also really easy for us to point the finger at another generation.
Exactly.
you
Well,
know,
the
rather than
younger
take
generation are also more savvy. They have more non-negotiables. They're going to take less shit. So
They actually do take more action because they're the ones that are actually changing the politics.
they do
out
therapy.
there.
There's a lot of that stuff too.
They're taking
Yeah,
ownership emotionally.
Yeah,
There's a lot of
yeah.
shit that the young, like Gen Z and now Alpha, are doing that even as a millennial, I couldn't have fathomed doing at their age. You know, I don't know. I think that every generation, to your point, it's like the older generation then points at the younger generation, then they point at the younger. And I think until we, again, go back to this, like, let's all look at the fact that we're in this together. What individual component can we each own, right? And how can I kind of stand up and say, okay, this is my part. What can I do to fix it or change it? I don't know that we're gonna change anything.
Yeah.
You know.
Yeah, and it's always going to come back to self,
Always
whether
gonna
it's
come back to
self-like, self-love. It's about us, but not in the sense of, like, it's my fault. But it's like,
No, in the sense that it starts with me.
it starts with me.
Yeah.
And I think I'm only speaking from experience of people that I know in my life. And a lot of us don't say it starts with me.
Of course.
No, I
Yeah.
would
Because
say
that's,
a lot.
that's, 'cause
Most
that's
people.
hard.
Yeah.
We point fingers instead of holding up mirrors. You know?
Yeah.
Also can be expensive.
True. And then, and I'm going to segue into weaponizing therapy now,
Yeah.
right? So let's say a lot of us do start doing the practice and we start weaponizing it. We start using it on our friends and on our parents and on our coworkers. Like, I see that also being a thing now.
We're very fast when we're on our self-betterment journey because we get into it like we got into CrossFit where we now believe almost like we're more advanced than people or we know better, especially with our partners. And just by doing that means that you have something to work on,
Totally. I laugh because I was just telling a client this story like 2 days ago. And again, to bring up Jack Kornfield, he used to always tell this story where he would say, don't think for a second, I'm paraphrasing, but like, don't think for a second that like Jesus of Nazareth didn't go home. And Mary and Joseph were like, yeah, sit down, shut up. you're in my house now. I don't care who you think you are, right? Or like Siddhartha didn't come home. They're like, okay,
Yeah.
Buddha, like you're still in my house. You're still my kid,
Yeah.
right? Like we do this thing where we think like, well, now I've done this and I'm more enlightened.
Yeah.
And so now I can kind of look my nose down on you. And especially the people who have known us the whole journey, it's like, yeah, okay. But I also was with you when you were, you know, I'm not even going to go into details of what I was doing in my 20s, but it's like, don't pretend like somehow you're high and mighty, because like I knew the you then.
Yeah.
And to your point, John, if we find ourselves doing it, that there's probably more work to be done, actually.
No, I agree, but I really want to dive into that. You're saying, yeah, I don't want to look back at me in my 20s and point fingers and like, why don't we celebrate our growth? Why do we go back and we're going to go a little bit into cancel culture with this, because that just triggered me to think about this.
Yeah.
We go back 10 years that someone tweeted and then try to cancel them now. And like, why don't we look at that tweet, look at the 10 years that have happened, be like,
Trajectory.
wow, look how much this person has grown, evolved, matured, and become a better human for humanity.
Yeah.
Why don't we do that? Why do we tear everyone down?
I mean, there's a lot of human kind of behavioral components in that. I think that holding people accountable is really uncomfortable because a lot of times, again, it reflects back on us, right? So it's easier for me to cancel somebody than it is for me to witness them in the messiness that is being human. Because if I witness somebody else in the messiness, I have to witness myself in the messiness, right? To hold myself accountable for things. I think that we really confuse accountability with canceling somebody, right? Like you can hold somebody accountable, which people should be held accountable, and not cancel them.
Yeah.
I don't know. I think there's a lot of different components that go into that. I don't know. What are your thoughts, John?
It's easier to hide than to show yourself.
So it's
That's what
hiding,
it is.
canceling? in
Yeah,
that
it's hiding
example?
behind phones. It's the comments that you would make on the phone, but not in person. To show yourself takes courage. It's easier to be afraid than to love. And I think cancel culture comes from hiding, not from really showing yourself.
So if we say, we'll just use the media as the antagonist here. If the media is the one doing the canceling, are they the ones hiding the truth, not the person being canceled?
Well, I don't think it's I think the media is the vehicle, but I
It's the
think
puppet almost.
I think it's the people. I think it's us who are either hiding or showing. And if you are pointing fingers, judging, and if you're talking shit about people just because you can, that's a form of hiding, not showing. Because showing to me is actually love. Showing to me is like opening your heart and saying, I can relate to you. We may not agree on things, but I'm going to show you self-compassion, or I'm going to share you part of my story that's vulnerable. To me, that's showing. Hiding is easy. Hiding it.
Right. And again, going back to like accountability can still be had without demonizing or canceling, right? And I think that's a really hard thing for a lot of people to differentiate.
Yeah.
So it's like, for example, when I have these conversations, like you were saying something about being the victim. So many times I've had conversations with people, especially like relational work, where you can say to somebody that I love you, or that thing you did to me was wrong, and still not hold it as like this whole person is bad or evil. It does not justify behavior. It does not say that it was okay for them to do this, right? Or like in a fight, I was just working with a client the other day. It's like, you can apologize and still not necessarily agree with what's going on. They don't have to be the same thing,
Yeah.
right?
I think that is
It's a big one that a lot of people don't understand. It's like, I can say to you, I'm really sorry that I hurt your feelings, or I'm sorry that I was an asshole. I didn't mean for it to come out that way for whatever reason, right? And still not necessarily agree with the fight that's going on. Like, I just think that we're such as beings, we love things to be so black and white. It's all this or it's all that. You're all bad or you're all good, right?
Yeah.
And again, like, not to talk politics, but I remember very specifically during all the things that happened with, like, when George Floyd was killed, my best girlfriend, I remember her saying to me, and she is black, which is important to know in the story. I remember her saying to me, I didn't watch the entire video because I couldn't, which is fair. I didn't either. She said, but I will tell you what, the entire time I watched that video, the only thing I was looking at was that cop. I never once looked at George Floyd. And she said, and the only thing I could think about was, what happened to you? She's like, I didn't feel rage. I didn't feel, fuck this guy, he's got to burn in hell, I mean, yes, that's also kind of a natural, obviously, feeling, but she's like, all I felt was like deep sadness for what happened to you that made you be able to act like this, right? To do this to another person. And I think that's missing in a
Yeah.
lot of the ways that we show up in social media. It's super easy for us to hide behind our phones, in politics, right? We're not humanizing other people. We're putting them in boxes.
Yeah.
You believe this, that means you're this, and you're bad, and you're an other. And if you're an other, you're not me. I don't have to look at myself. I can say you're the problem.
Yeah. No,
Right.
wow. Let's pause right there. No, that question, what happened to you?
Yeah.
Because we don't ask that. You know,
Yeah.
sometimes my wife and I are walking and we see a homeless person on the floor.
Yeah.
You know, we live right here. We walk up and down Lincoln
Yeah.
and Venice. Like, we see it everywhere. And we're like, that was, and we look at our 2-year-old and how
Yeah.
much I love him and I cuddle him and like, that's my everything. Like, someone loved you.
Somebody was a
And
Yeah, that
did
was
this.
yeah,
Yeah.
that was
Like,
that
what
person.
happened to
Yeah.
you? And that's a huge thing.
Well, it opens the door for compassion and one story, not just seeing the result.
And it's
Yeah.
not condoning behavior. There's a difference. We've got to be able to see the difference. I'm not saying what somebody did is okay, but you can hold the tension of the opposites. You can hold the difference between
Yeah.
this person is not evil, even if they've done an evil thing, right?
Yeah. I mean, we could look at the Will Smith example. He had a
Right,
human
right,
moment. Was it right?
course
Was
not.
it correct?
Yeah.
No.
Yeah.
But because he's on this pedestal, I mean, it
Right.
was just even more all over the place.
Right.
But like, dude, he had a human moment. He went up there, slapped a dude on stage, something that should have never happened.
Yeah.
But still, like, what happened to you in that moment? And like, let's not going into unpacking his whole journey. That's a
Yeah,
whole
yeah,
nother.
yeah.
There's a whole lot there
Yeah,
that was
sure.
way more than that. That was just a cherry in the lit fuse.
Mm-hmm,
But as we start wrapping this up, this is amazing. I know we didn't get anything super specific, but I think what we really talked about was the overall importance of these conversations, the overall importance of therapy, the overall importance of self-acknowledgement. And, you know, another thing that was kind of triggering in my head was opinions, right? We all have opinions.
Yeah.
And we don't allow ourselves to have opinions anymore. And if your opinion's not my opinion,
Yeah.
you're the
Right.
evil.
Because
Yeah.
you're afraid to get canceled or judged.
Yeah, it's
Also,
like-
opinions are not facts.
No.
And thoughts are not facts. And feelings are not facts.
Yeah.
That's also a
My
really important thing,
opinion is
too.
this. It doesn't make me a bad person either.
Yeah.
You know, let's just, if we use politics, oh, my opinion is more toward Republican right here. You're racist.
Yeah.
What? Why am I now a racist? Or my opinion is more Democratic here. Oh, you liberal, entitled. Like, it's just so tough now. It's like,
Yeah.
I think we could be on both sides all over the place, have our own opinion and
Yeah.
still make lovingly as human beings. And that's really what we're trying to get to here. It's like, you can be you and I could be me and we could disagree, but still love each other as human beings and show compassion. Unless you're sociopath, psychopath, criminal, that's a whole nother thing. Because I know sometimes people are like, yeah, but like, we're not talking about that. We're
Yeah,
just talking about
outlier.
humans.
Yeah.
I love your message, man. I think that's why what's on the wall is powerful. Is kind of going back to stripping everything, and love
Love
Yeah.
over fear.
Thank you.
through love.
So what have I not asked that you guys love getting asked, want to shed light on in these last few minutes?
Everything's I don't want to.
Feels fluid.
Yeah, it feels fluid. It feels great. We could announce our book title. Maybe
Yeah.
maybe that.
Like what
Well,
we're
we
doing.
definitely talk about the book.
That's
yeah.
about it. Yeah, no, it's all good. It was,
Yeah. I think the conversation was fluid. It
I
felt,
feel like
felt
it was.
natural.
I feel like it was complete full circle. You know, I think I like ending it back on love. I think
Yeah.
it's good.
Cool. So I got my final question. So
All right.
you can either both answer it, but I don't know if that's going to work because then you're going to hear each other's.
Oh, right.
Or I
Four
can ask
fingers
you
in
a
my
few
ear.
different
Yeah.
ones, you know. So the first thing is like, how would you define love?
Mm.
I mean, love is a verb. Love is an action,
Mm-hmm.
right? Love
what I
is
say, yeah.
I mean, it's a choice that I get to make in every single moment, and you know, who is the love over fear? Is that Wayne Dyer originally said that, right? Like everything in your life can be broken down to love or fear. Is it love or fear? I think it's a moment by moment action that we choose.
I think love is a living, breathing thing. I think love is not dwelling on what was or what will be or could be, but accepting and living in what is today, what is now.
Yeah. And the final question, how would you define living a life through love?
Difficult. Expensive. Exhausting. Oh, man.
Living a life through love. Ownership.
I would say looking
Acceptance.
inward.
Yeah.
Mm.
Ownership.
I think looking inward is living a life through love.
Yeah.
Whatever that looks like for you, looking inward, starting with self.
Mhm.
Practicing acceptance.
Yeah.
Self and others, but just the practice of acceptance, I think, is living a life.
If you haven't noticed, she's wine glass, I'm shot glass. I'm 2 words, and which is,
They go together.
that's what I'm saying, peanut butter and chocolate. But that's how we're known. Is she's the wine glass, I'm the shot glass.
Amazing.
Yeah. Thank you for having us.
Oh, you're
This is
welcome.
awesome.
I'm glad you had you here. I actually have one more question. I always say that's the final question,
Yeah.
but I say, where can people find you?
Yeah.
Is actually the final
okay.
question.
Yeah. At the Angry Therapist
I
across the
was like,
board.
I'm waiting.
I was
Yours
like,
is very easy.
well, do I give my home address? What do you?
If you want.
Altadena, California.
Cell phone,
Yeah,
social
exactly.
security
Yeah.
number.
At the Angry Therapist, social media.
Across everything.
Yeah.
Yeah. I'm mostly on Instagram, Vanessa S. Bennett, and then play around on TikTok as the Coda Yoda. And then our book is called It's Not Me, It's You, which is our kind of pithy way of talking about what we've talked about, which is taking accountability and how infrequently rather, it tends to happen these days.
Yeah.
Awesome. We'll link all that up in the show notes.
Cool.
Thanks for having us. Right? It's
This
us,
was
the
awesome.
collective.
Yeah.
Yes. Thank you for having us.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You're
And I
thinking.
also love that that you were a part of my past, and I get to connect with you again. I think that's really cool. So
Full
that's
circle, right?
Yeah, full circle. And you live in Los Angeles long enough, and you run into everyone. So
That's true.
I'm born and raised here. Where were you born?
Korea, came here when I was 3.
Okay.
But I am older than you, so I think I've been here longer than you.
That is true.
That is
Technically,
true.
you've been
I've been
close.
here through everything: the riots, the fucking
That's true.
earthquakes. Every city in LA, I've pretty much been.
Coming here at 3 and being here that you're basically you're
You're
Angelina.
born
We
and
can
raised,
say.
Yeah.
I always
mean,
jokingly say that our biggest cultural difference is not that he's Korean, is that he's from LA and I'm from New York.
Yeah.
It's a big
You ever
cultural
drive down Coenga and you're like, fuck, I remember when this street was unknown, or I mean all these streets.
There's
that we
so
know.
many sections.
Well, Venice and everything. Yeah, we're in Altadena now, which is a little
difference.
town.
Oasis.
Yeah, I know the area.
Yeah.
Awesome.
All right.
Thank you. Thank you so much for tuning in to Live Through Love. If you love this episode, you'll love this episode.